all of you to the Ethical Culture Society of Bergen County. As Ken mentioned, we will be recording the platform address, including the Q&A, and posting it to Facebook and to YouTube. For those of you who are new or unfamiliar with ethical culture, we're a humanist congregational movement about 150 years old, dedicated to exploring the ways in which we can live meaningful and ethical lives. Unlike a traditional religious group, there's no supernatural content to our services. But that said, there's no requirement of belief or non-belief either. That's a matter between you and your conscience. Our motto is deed before creed, which is to say that we believe how you act in this life is more important than any creed you might espouse. Our speaker this morning will be Maryann Woods-Murphy, who I will introduce more fully a little bit later. I would like at this time to introduce someone from our membership committee to make a short announcement.
That would be me. Good morning,
Okay.
everyone. And repeat David's welcome to all members, former members in this case, I see a few, and friends of the society. We're really very happy to see everyone on a Sunday morning, no matter how near or far away you are. And if you are new to the society, please check us out online. And you can contact the office for more information if you need it. And I'll also say, please remember that these Zoom meetings on Sunday mornings are open. So if you have friends or relatives you think would be interested in a topic, please get the Zoom from the office and send it around. We'd like to see more folks. Okay, thanks, David.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker this morning, who is Dr. Maryann Woods-Murphy. And I'll mention that almost exactly 3 years ago, she spoke live in person at our society in the building. We're very happy to have her back. Dr. Woods-Murphy is the 2010 New Jersey State Teacher of the Year, and she will explore techniques that foster community building and social and emotional learning in today's classrooms. And among other things, Dr. Woods-Murphy co-chaired Teens Talk About Racism for 13 years, which she did with the retired science teacher Theodora Lacey, who many of you know. And her platform just 3 years ago was on that topic. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Woods-Murphy. Go ahead, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here at Ethical Culture, my first home in Teaneck for all things inquiry and humanism. I wanted to share my screen with you, which is an exciting moment in all of these types of meetings. And that'll help me walk through some of the ideas I have to share with you today. So I hope that you can all see it. Yes? Okay. Today, we're going to be talking about techniques to achieve equity in the classroom. And I wondered, how we might design our learning experiences to foster equity. And I realized that when we design for equity, we really give other people fair and rich learning opportunities. We really, the beginning of making classrooms that are engaging and rich and share all voices is all voices sometimes, but not usually, is designing for equity. So right now today, we're going to do a few things. We're going to start with a self-compassion checkup. We're going to think about why equity really matters, why power and perspectives in the classroom have anything of importance. What does this have to do with class design? I'll share with you 3 protocols that invite people in, and it's going to be a little smorgasbord, a little tasting menu of these protocols, because we really, in a venue like this, don't have an opportunity to dig deeply, but I just want to share with you sort of the practical part of what it is that I'm talking about, rather than just talk about equity. making a connection to social and emotional learning, and then we'll reflect and talk and chat and see how this all hits you. So I'm going to ring this bell. It's a Tibetan singing bowl. And I want to take a moment to bring kind awareness to the impact of our day on our bodies and emotions. We are invited to offer ourselves the same kindness and compassion that we would offer a loved one, taking a break from our busy thinking and judging minds. With our eyes closed, I'd like to ask you to put both hands to your heart, letting them rest flat on your chest, and take 3 full, deep breaths into the body with me, letting your chest and belly expand. Thank you. Take time to acknowledge that you're doing the best you can and offer yourself any words of support or compassion that you might offer a loved one quite generously. Be there for yourself as a friend, holding yourself unconditionally just for a few more breaths. Ring my bell. Thank you. So why equity? What is it? What are we talking about? It's the state or quality of being just, impartial, and fair. We think about equity, we think about justice, and we have to think of it as structural and systemic, not something that's sort of applied to an existing structure. Folks often confuse equity and equality. Equity really helps us understand what everybody needs, right? Equality is same for all. Folks use an image a lot of times. I like this one. The image that travels around often is a fence with children on the fence. And on the left, you'll see the children with the same stairs. But I like this image of flowers because flowers are organic, and the theme throughout this presentation is also an organic view of education. Flowers of different heights need different supports. So on the left, you have equality. Every flower gets the same stool, right? But on the right, every sunflower in this case gets the stool that it needs to get over the fence to get some sunlight, right? Similarly, in our classrooms and in our meetings and in our community organizations, we need different levels of scaffolding or support to help us get what we need. And that's what equity is doing. So how might our classrooms and community meetings be places of equity? So what I'd like you to do is respond in the chat. What do you think might make our classrooms and community meetings places of equity? And I'm assuming you can do that your chat is open. Just respond a little bit in the chat. And I'll be able to look at it on my screen.
And for those who might be looking for their chat in the Zoom window, along the bottom, there should be an icon you can click on the chat.
If someone can't access the chat and has a burning desire to speak, then you can ask to be unmuted. I'm thinking yes?
Yes, they can unmute themselves if they so desire.
Great. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat. Okay, I see Sylvia is talking about accommodations for unique needs of every learner. David says, ignore people who shout. Okay, David, thank you. Allowing for all students to share their cultures, thoughts, and feelings. Thanks, Joanna. First step to get to know the needs of individuals, right, Janet? No front of the room, no back of the room. Right on, Peter. Yep. These are great. Any more thoughts? Okay. Thank you. You might have said things like, and I see what you said, but you might have even been thinking or journaling or imagining some of the things that I've listed here, like okay, I see here also recognize everyone in the classroom with the same potentials. Right, beautiful. So welcoming our LGBTQ plus students, increasing our cultural competency, really making our classroom a welcoming place by doing the hard work of recognizing our implicit bias. There's a project out of Harvard, Project Implicit Bias, and you can really comb through what are your blocks? We all have them. What implicit bias do we carry into the classroom? What are the obstacles to making a more inclusive classroom? We really need to advocate for students who need support, building relationships, co-creating, becoming an advocate for our own children, but also an advocate for all children. Recognizing that the students in our room are part of the learning. It's not just us giving this learning to them. Equity is an important topic. As was mentioned earlier, David talked about me being a New Jersey State Teacher of the Year, and I'm in the equity chair for the organization of the NJ Council of State Teachers. We created an equity statement that we sent to the State Board of Education. We published it in the Union magazine, really because during these times, it's so important for teachers to stand up and think about what equity means. It always has been important, but it's become very apparent that we need to focus on this explicitly and not assume that all wonderful and nice teachers are doing this work, because it doesn't always come naturally to people. We need to state things. We need to say things. Okay. Today, though, we're really going to think about how we share the space, time, and presence in our classrooms in terms of equity. How can we improve what we do? So I like to think in images. This is, I think, an image of a typical classroom, a classroom with the teacher in the center, like the sun god, and all of these rays emanating out from this font of knowledge and wisdom. And hey, I like the spotlight like anybody else. I'm presenting here with you today, and I enjoy taking a lead sometimes. In a classroom, sometimes I think I'm funny. I'm actually not very funny, but that's the funny part for my students, when I try to be funny and they think it's not funny, and then I think it's funny, but still it's a bit of a show, right? Whatever I'm doing up there, it can be a bit of a show. So this is the way the power dynamic happens in many classrooms. And sometimes we do want to hear from a presenter. Today I'm presenting, other times I might with my students present a bit, but if it's only my voice throughout the learning, day after day, hour after hour, I would say that that's not a classroom that's designed for equity. Instead, I'd rather see something like this, right? I pulled this from an image of a co-authorship network, Creative Commons image, and this is how people share power, I would say, in this co-authorship network. Similarly, if a classroom is really working right, there should be almost an infinite amount of connections that can be found among students to do their joint work. The work of a classroom, we say classroom community, but how much do we actually design for that experience? I overheard your RE director talking about breakout rooms. Of course, that's marvelous, because students can share their joys, their concerns actively and not just be spectators to listen to the fabulous words of their elders, but may indeed bring their very core beliefs, core thoughts to the room. If we don't design for this to happen, it simply will not. How can you include all voices if you don't have the freedom to have unscripted, meaningful conversations? Unscripted. You simply won't. If you don't design for these things, I would say not just in classrooms, but in community organizations, in towns, all around the nation, we need to trust that the wisdom is in the people, and people can share important insights if we let them. You know, Cubism's awesome, I think. And one of the things that folks like Picasso was doing is taking an image, say, of a face and looking at that face from a variety of perspectives and understanding how we can kind of deconstruct the face, but also know that the face itself is what it is from multitude of perspectives. We somehow can see that face better when we understand it from all of these perspectives. So, for example, let's say, this is another image to try to make my point. Let's say that the blue dots are your students and they're instructed to see the elephant. So from which perspectives do your students see the elephant in the room? How can we get a fuller picture of the elephant? So here's the elephant in the center. And in order to know the elephantness of that elephant, I need to tap into what everyone can see all around the elephant. These different dots are people and perspectives, and they come at the elephant from a whole variety of perspectives. And we need to unleash those perspectives in our community organizations, and we have to trust the people to be smart. When we design for equity, we can invite our students and our members to bring their whole world and lives into their classrooms. Sometimes we want to really mute people. Of course, in a meeting like this, it's important because I'm talking, and if everyone were listening to their favorite NPR show right now, it would distract our point. I get it. But we need to figure out ways for the students and the people in our community organizations to bring their whole lives to the classroom and the groups. What does that mean practically? So I want you to respond in the chat. Who holds the power in the classroom? Say something to me. I'm watching your chat. The teacher, says David. So you're writing your ideas in the chat. Thank you so much. Typically the teacher. Child-centered, it's a group effort. Thanks, Alan. Everyone, Peter. Yes. Often the loudest and most obnoxious kid. I see a theme, David. I see a theme. It would have to be the student talking or answering the question. Yeah. When the principal comes in, the principal, power hierarchy. Yeah, sure. That's right. Unless you disrupt it, right? Unless you say, unless you treat the principal like anybody. That takes a bit of a leap, a bit of an audacious leap. The subject, right? The subject, Jim. That's what we do sometimes in our classes. We think the subject is the king of the room, is the soul, you know, the sun god. I'm a Spanish speaker too, so is the sun in the middle of everything. Sometimes it's a student who has emotional problems, thanks Beth, and needs to be the center of the attention at time, distracting the teacher from other students' needs. Yes, somehow the energy's pulled in different directions. Why does anyone have to be the ruler in a room? Thank you, great question, wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much. You can keep writing things. So designing for equity means building the opportunity to maximize interactions and voices, emphasizing the interpersonal. The power I have found lies in a great protocol. it helps me see the wisdom in the room. I don't have to be a magician to have that crazy, imagine you're running that room with those zillion blue dots, and your principal walks in. That can be tricky, and I've had that happen. Trust me. And it looks like a hot mess, but then I explain how it is so not a hot mess. It is not a hot mess. It is a beautiful thing going on, if my words can only reveal it. So with the first protocol, we're going to look at 3 protocols today. And the first protocol is circle practice. Typically in the world of non-COVID pandemic times, circle practice would happen in a physical circle, right? And it has different parts. You ring the bell like we did this morning, or some kind of sound. And what that does is it opens up the circle. Now, I've been running circles online for people. Just last week, I ran one for the US Department of Education for the folks that are working in there and transitioning from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, because at some point I was in 2012, a Washington Teaching Ambassador Fellow, and I went to the Department of Education to be an advisor, and those same people are there now. So they needed a little healing after the week that they've had in Washington. So I ran one of these circles. And the sound, what the sound does is it sort of calms and designates a space that's not everyday space. The usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. So sometimes you have to provide a kind of container or vehicle for people to express themselves and to simply be. So when we have a circle, we host a circle or we create a circle, even online, we have to hold the circle, be present. In our minds, we imagine, for example, today, that we are all in a circle. We are holding the image of fire, where our ancestors gathered, where it's deep in our DNA. We have this experience of sharing stories, right? Being together with the glowing fire in the middle, and there we are all huddled together as humans, sharing who we are. And that is what circle means. Another part of circle practice is creating a talking piece or a protocol for speaking, rather than me calling on folks and saying, okay, Pam, would you please share? Or David, you as the participant would simply say, I'm picking up the talking piece, like I have this little stone, I'm picking up the talking piece, I imagine it's in the center, I'm putting the talking piece down, right? And this way, in a very democratic fashion, people will wait, take turns, but they don't have to be assigned an opportunity to speak. They can simply jump in. And it's amazing how this works with 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds. You can find that this protocol really does work. We agree on certain things, right? Treating each other well, listening with compassion, honoring each other, having no judgment. And when you're in a circle, it's a space where stories will emerge, right? The circle I ran last week, a woman shared that she had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And it was really heartbreaking revelation. In that circle, we were all able to support her, but we certainly didn't get off of the circle or out of the circle and then tell our 10 best friends that she's going through this. What she shared in the circle stayed in the circle. What we learn in the circle leaves the circle, right? What we hear from each other stays. What we learn goes out of the circle. So we really rely on the power of silence and how it can help us heal. So for example, let's practice a minute at the beginning of a circle. After I would ring something, I would do a check-in, and in the chat, you can simply say, I need, I bring, I look forward to. So why don't you use the check-in, I bring. What do you bring to this conversation here today? You can put it in the chat and I'll read it. Oh, I see Pam has, we do that in community service with Stones, great, great. My biases. Open mind. What do you bring? Curiosity. What do you bring? Love. Passion for curiosity and learning. Enthusiasm and coffee. Where's my cup? Oh, beautiful. Great. So in the beginning of a circle, you check in. It's a simple question, you know, an easy question. Something like I need, I bring, I look forward to, or something like I am encouraged by, or for example, one that I ran with teachers recently, the question was, hope has the face of plus name of student. Hope has the face of Walter Geety, who graduated college 20 years after I taught him and invited me to the ceremony, right? So then it moves to core questions. With this builds community. I did a circle with some really tough union teachers who I work for the New Jersey Education Association now as a consultant in schools to support the teachers and build relationships between the administrators and the teachers. So I was working with only union reps, and they were like looking at me in the beginning like, are you kidding? Like, really, with your Tibetan singing bowl? And here I am. And I gotta say, it was amazing. And so the core questions really bring people together. And what I do in virtual circles is you pair people up maybe with just one other person for 5 minutes or 6 minutes to answer one of these questions. Questions like this, right? What does it mean to be popular? If you could spend a day with anyone who's ever lived, what would it be and why? And it's amazing what people share about themselves, but it doesn't force people into a corner of sharing because people don't always feel the same level of comfort with sharing, right? So you're not trying to like hit them over the head with the Tibetan singing bowl, like share, share. You're just providing an opportunity for them to do so. After people have shared from the core, for example, if I'm running a circle that's 45 minutes, we might have 3 core questions, 5 to 7 minutes each. And then at the end, we check out and we give people the opportunity to say how they're leaving, feeling, what they're carrying with them from this session, some way to close it. And then I ring the bell. Another thing about the bell is that when people say something particularly heart-wrenching, meaningful, poignant, capturing everything, you can ring the bell throughout to basically honor that. Or someone can ask for the bell to be rung because they feel that the bell is needed. That's another thing I've seen. So the basics of running a circle is open it, teach and remember the guidelines, do the work, bring yourself, build community, close it, and close the circle. And this is how you can run circles. It works virtually. I had training to do this over 2 full weekends. And I thought, really? I'm going to be talking on 2 full weekends. We're going to be in pretend circles for 2 weekends. And it was really great. And I surprised myself, and I still surprise myself when I see how folks appreciate having this opportunity to share. So when you do this in classes, students can share really important parts of their lives. For most of my career, I was a world language teacher, a Spanish teacher. So students with very limited vocabulary can speak. But for other parts of my career, I was a gifted and talented teacher and coordinator, and students who are at the very, very highest performing end of what we understand success to be often don't get a chance to speak because they raise their poor little hands and folks say, oh, I know you know it. Don't worry about it. You got this. And those kiddos don't get a chance to share the important parts of their lives. They are so often muted in a similar way to the way that students who struggle with some basic educational areas are muted. So you really can give them an opportunity. I've run some circles co-led with teachers in Plainfield and Irvington, and it's been very satisfying. Okay, the next practice I wanted to share with you is called Kiva. And Kiva is a place and it's a practice. This is a Kiva. It's a Native American ceremonial place, but it's also a protocol. I learned about it. When I worked, as I said, I worked at the U.S. Department of Education for a year. What a wild, crazy, exciting time that was. One of the things I did was work with the Hispanic Commission on Excellence, and I traveled around the country with these people who worked with teachers and had giant community meetings, like 500 people at a school in California. All these people, every kind of people. Dolores Huerta, you know, the labor organizer, I met her at one of these meetings. It was just crazy. Everybody coming into these meetings, and they used this process that was brand new to me called Kiva, and I've used it time and time again in my large group and small group and every kind of group meeting, 500 people, 25 people, and it's very easy. And that's the beauty too. And what it is you choose any 6 people from the room. It represents the 4 cardinal directions: the sky above, the earth below. And the idea is that any 6 people will represent the wisdom in the room. So you ask one question, like, for example, I saw it in a room where they were talking with presidents of Hispanic serving institutions, right? And they chose 6 of these people. They got up in front of the room and they said, what is working in your university? And then each person speaks for 1 minute about whatever. 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. They go through the 6 people. Now they go another round to say, please lift up something someone said in the first 6 answers, right? And so what you find is that really powerful things are being lifted up. In this particular example, like the other 100 people were all at small tables listening to what was happening and jotting down some notes. And then all of that was taken, because that was a large group meeting, and everyone went back and dug deeper into some of those questions. But it is very powerful to see how just the one question can really inspire a lot of important information sharing. So, excuse me, in that case, it was, what's working in your organization? What are you struggling with? And what would you like to do? That took all day, all day long. There was a Kiva council. We did the questions. Folks went back to tables, talk. They did another question, same process. And then at the end of the day, they chose their top questions. And we had, and people wrote all this on into their cloud drives. And in the end of the day, there was this gigantic document sharing the priorities of 100 Hispanic serving institution presidents. Well, whether it's that kind of group or a classroom of 26th graders who want to talk about what is and is not working about their learning, this process works beautifully. So what happens is that folks realize that their words, perception, and analysis are really what matters. They can't zoom out because they're being asked to engage. Finally, the final protocol that I want to talk about is one of my favorites, and it's from this guy, and you can see a TED Talk that he created, Dan Rothstein at Somerville. He created something called the Question Formulation technique. Now, there's a site online, he and Luz Santana. These guys were working in Massachusetts, and they were working with families, and they would always have these meetings and no one would come. And they said, gosh, why aren't the people coming to our meetings? We have food, we did everything. We have the best posters ever. And nobody was coming. And then finally they said, well, you know what? People don't know what to ask. And then they gave them questions and the people still didn't come. And they said, well, something is very wrong. We have to figure out something that people want, and we can't tell them what they want. We have to ask them. So Luth and Dan created something called question formulation technique. And it sprang from community organizing, but it's used all over the world today. And what it is, it's these people, sorry, my computer just went nuts. These people put everything for free on their Right Question Institute site. All of their PowerPoints, all of their protocols are just available. There's a teacher forum that folks can join. I learned it from the website. I went on the website and I was like, this is great. I want to do this. I was working in Nutley, New Jersey, and I wanted to learn it. So I taught myself. And then I went to my school and I taught a whole bunch of teachers in my school. And all of a sudden, everyone was using this strategy, and it was all for free. And then I went to Massachusetts and I met Dan and worked with him a little bit as well. So what is it? What is this thing? So Dan says that the question formulation technique honors ignorance. And what it is it is a process. And this is the process. You design a question focus, which is not itself a question. You produce questions. You work with close-ended and open-ended questions. You prioritize questions. You plan next steps and reflect. Take a look. So here's an example that I put for you. I put together for you. This would be an example of what they call a question focus. And remember, it's not itself a question. So here it is. Many students do not participate in school activities. You can agree, you can disagree. So what you do is you put people together at, for example, if it's live, you can put them in small groups of 4 or 5. And if it's not live, you can put them in Google Docs of 4 or 5, just the same. And you pick a scribe and you say, go for 10 minutes, write down questions that you have related to this Q focus. Now the Q focus can be a statement, it can be a picture, it can be a sound. So I trained the teachers in Franklin Lakes public schools to do this, and we found pictures were really effective. You know, pictures of, for example, pollution for science teachers, or even math that the students hadn't quite learned yet could be used, a kind of a mathematical image. So here are some questions that I came up with related to this Q focus. Which students feel invited to participate? How do students learn about the activities? Does the school offer transportation after school? How do we know that students are interested in certain activities? So you go and you go and you go and you make up these questions, and the scribe writes them. And here's the cool part. Dan has these rules, and one of the rules is you post the rules, and it's you may not judge or discuss the questions. So David, for example, probably is going to say, are students failing to join because the loudmouth kid is always taking over the meetings, right? And he's saying it, and then I might be in his group and say, oh gosh, David, the loudmouth thing again. I could be his classmate, right? I'm not allowed to say anything to David, right? I have to just let David say his question. Even if he asks the same question in multiple ways, he has to make this list of questions. I need to write it down as is. I can't say, excuse me, but the grammar on that is incorrect. No. Or, what, don't you mean this? No. You write down what the person says, and you write and write and write, and that's how you start. Then the next thing you do is that all these people have questions, and you say, okay, folks, here's your next task. Your next task is, which of these questions are open-ended? What is an open-ended question? Oh, okay. It's one that has like a lot of answers. What's a closed-ended question? Oh, yes, no, some fact. Okay, go through your questions and tell me which are open and which are closed. All right, people do that, takes them a little while. And then you say, now you've got that done, pick one open-ended question and turn it into a closed-ended question. Pick one closed-ended question and turn it into an open-ended question. Now they're working on that. Busy, busy, busy. Teachers who, there might be one really loud one normally at a meeting and everybody else is sitting in the like farthest back row possible. None of that. You're taking a cafeteria and everybody's working at tables or Google Docs, which works just the same. And so folks go through that process and then you say, okay, awesome, great. Now your job is to choose your top 3 questions. Maybe you're going to highlight it if it's in a Google Doc. In person, you're going to like check them off. You're going to disagree. At this point, you are arguing. No. I think it's about transportation. No. I think students don't understand what the job is of the club. So they argue and they come up with their top 3. Why did you pick it? And what is it? And so every little group has their own questions, right? And then you put them all out there. You can put them in another document or you can put them on the wall. And now you vote as a whole room, for your top questions of the whole thing. Okay, what does this do? All of this going on. What this does is it helps people really understand what they care about. And when you ask these questions, you can start to find solutions by digging into the questions themselves. So when I've run these types of workshops, I'm not even talking. I'm just saying, okay, open-ended, closed-ended questions. And it's very cool what happens. So for example, this imaginary group has voted for their top 3 questions, and these are the ones that they chose. But other groups might have chosen something else. You can do this for a whole grade level in schools. You can do this for one ethical culture organization in New Jersey and then New York. I mean, you can find out what is the most awesome thing about being an ethical culture member and how can we make it even more awesome. So this is the whole process on one slide. Ask as many questions as you can. Now this part here, you post on big paper on the wall or on your screen. Do not stop to judge, discuss, or answer. Record it exactly as stated and change statements into questions. So this is all, and I'll share this slide deck with you and you can have it for your life and put it all over your house and refrigerator and make placemats of it. Maybe it could be useful. So why are these interactive approaches necessary now more than ever? I'm going to ask that in the chat. Why do you think? Why do you think these interactive approaches might be more necessary than ever? Love to see what you think in the chat if you can access it and put your great thinking in there. We need to communicate better. Break down barriers and really listen to people with different views. Right. People are not listening to each other. Isolation, bridge us and them. Oh yeah. Polarization of society. So true. Yes. Our nation is so divided. Education is on Zoom, right? Interaction is very difficult unless you embrace strategies like this and protocols. The power of a protocol is priceless. Yes. So extreme, this isolation. Yes. Give a voice to everyone. Equity. Yes. Yeah. Isolation. Yeah. My granddaughter is 11 and I have another one who's 7 and they're in Teaneck public schools and their parents are divorced. So 1 week they're with us and 1 week they're with dad. And I see such a radical difference, for example, when they do breakout rooms, right? When students are one-on-one or small group. With the bigger one, they do more breakout rooms and she's completely engaged. And the little one, it's talk, very few breakout rooms. But when they do breakout rooms, those little kids are so amazing at how they connect. They are hungry to connect. We have to realize that people really can do more than we think they can, and they're smarter than we realize. So in the beginning, I talked about social emotional learning, and some folks like to look at the castle wheel. And I want to also put the caveat of social emotional learning that sometimes people criticize focusing on social emotional learning in schools because it's thinking about oh gosh, if these kids who were poverty stricken and hungry only had more grit, they could do better. Certainly, we need to provide all of the basic needs for every child. Social emotional learning helps us when we think about beyond those needs, those basic needs that everyone has the right to. How might we in our rooms develop self awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, help kids with responsible decision making? It really is very important.
Am I
And
being heard?
yes,
Oh, okay, thank you. Wasn't
did you
sure how
want
to
to say
do it.
something?
No, I just was confused about the icon. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. The icon is from Castle. It's social emotional learning.
No, I meant the mute, the unmute.
Okay, great. So when we begin, we do involve ourselves with social emotional learning when we design classrooms that welcome every student's story and invite every young person's whole self. I was talking with a school counselor, high school level school counselor in another district, another county that I work with. And she said that out of 309 students in her caseload, 290 were failing something, right? Not because they couldn't understand the material, but because they were completely disengaged, I would say. And other issues are there too. But who knows what those issues are if we just plow ahead and we don't listen, connect, and transform. The form and function of what we do is irrevocably coupled. The design of our learning experience create human connections, and they make them possible. I love the mycelial network, the Wood Wide Web. There was a New York Times article in the beginning of December about this, but I learned about it from 3 6th grade boys. I gave these little boys an opportunity to do a project, and they said, we want to do the mycelial network. And we're going to make a big box of dirt, and we're going to pretend that human beings are sort of in their own mycelial network. I said, what is this, guys? What? They said, this is something amazing. There's fungal connections underneath the earth, and trees are connected. And when a tree is suffering, the fungal network can send nutrients to the tree that's ailing, or even kick away predators. I said, guys, come on, this is like the Matrix. This sounds really spooky and creepy. And what? You're going to have like little action figure guys in your box full of dirt? This sounds like you're trying to hurt people. They said, no, no, no. And they taught me step by step about this real network. And you can learn more about it from the New York Times, December 2nd. Underneath the earth, we have this wonderful series of connections. Why am I talking about it? I'm talking about it because it's how we are. It's how our children grow and learn. It's how we grow and learn. And when we have a recognition that these type of networks are fundamental to how we create equity in our communities, we can succeed. And succeed means all of us, right? In a more organic, interwoven, socially complex, and sometimes chaotic set of interactions. But we can really hear everyone when we build in these protocols and when we design for equity. So I have some resources for you. I can send it out in the chat, this slide deck. Feel free. Anything you can use, it's yours. And I have some resources for you. So with that, I think we can have some conversation, some questions, and I'll stop my share. And thanks so much.
So thank you. David, do you want to take it, or do you want me to?
You go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Maryann. That's fascinating stuff. We're going to open up the floor for Q&A right now. So as we did earlier, if you could use Zoom, raise your hand, and I will pop the little video link into the chat again, so that if you need to look at how to raise your hand, it is there. And I will remind you that it is star, remind me, David, it is star
6 to raise your hand and star 9 to mute or unmute.
if you are on a telephone and don't actually have
Yeah,
a
if you're on a
computer.
telephone, right?
Yes.
And if you're having trouble finding the raise hands, Zoom did just recently move it. It's under the reactions button right now. If you're on the, if you can't find it, try clicking on the reactions button and it'll probably be there.
Thank you. And Diane Kozarski, please unmute yourself and proceed.
Starting with me,
Yes.
Maryann, can students shift gears if their family is like organized on a different communications network system, patriarchal, hierarchical, dysfunctional? I don't know what it might be like, or just very old fashioned or something like that. Or other teachers in the school are not using this system. Do they just, this is a wonderful oasis and they thrive in this particular classroom, and then they go to another one that has completely different set culture? How does that work?
Well, thank you for that. I agree that that happens, right? That, for example, you know, you have, when your kids are little, they have the friends who they can jump on the couch. You know, they can go over there and jump on the couch, and then they go somewhere else and they have to sit with their hands folded and drink their cup of, you know, juice very, very peacefully. So students really understand where they can do what. But I would say that for the system to benefit students, teacher leadership is fundamental to create networks of teachers who share these practices and do them more than just in one golden classroom, right? Parents, for example, need to be included in the conversation. I would suggest community meetings. I would suggest using these, you know, I've been to a lot of meetings in my own town of Teaneck, and it's just 3 people on a panel and you never really get to talk. And it's kind of like, it makes me die a little bit inside, because I really don't want to just hear somebody talk. I want to have an opportunity to talk with some other people, and so you have to build it, right? I would say the best way in schools or in communities is a small group of people who try, measure, and learn what they're doing, and then building that out, and then a sort of gradual takeover of the organization from the bottom to topple the hierarchy and create a flatter, more vibrant, democratic organization. And so I'm not dismissing your other concern about the patriarchal family units and culturally, and to be culturally relevant, but I think that students will learn if we teach them step by step how to interact in this way. The fact that there are clear protocols, Diane, are important. So for example, some students might be confused if you come in and you just start saying, everybody talk, and then the poor kid is like, I'm not going to say anything. So if you give them the protocols to talk and you help them script it, then they'll start sharing, right? So that's why I'm a big fan of the protocols, because earlier in my career, when I wasn't as good as I got later, I would just say, I think everybody was like me, you know, and I would throw this stuff out there and it would be great for some and not so great for others. So that's why I rely on protocols, teacher leadership, and community building and moving the system that way. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have 2 related questions. So these techniques, are these techniques for a teacher to use in a classroom, or versus someone like you to use with teachers to teach them how to teach, or both? And secondly, and I assume it's the former mainly. So where does this fit in the rhythm of a class, you know,
Yeah, sure.
through the semester?
Yeah, so I was in the classroom for 28 years, right? I've taught K through 12, and I've used these strategies from elementary school. The final part of my career was working with 4th through 6th graders, and earlier on with middle school and high school particularly. So I use these strategies with my students. Then, because I can't stop myself, I started teaching my colleagues, and then I would go tell my administrators and teach them. I wasn't in a position of power in these school districts, but I kind of just, you know, do like creative critical insurgents, right? And get people doing it because I can't help but share. So these are absolutely for use with everybody. I've taught teachers of pre-literate kids how to do question formulation technique with pictures, right? This is absolutely for every kind of, yeah, Janet, thank you. Pre-K through grad school, these strategies work with everybody. I think that our belief system that makes us think that little kids are not smart enough or able enough, it's just wrong. It's just crazy. Kids are amazing from almost the minute they can articulate anything or before. So you can use it. And then of course now, I mean, since only February 2019, I'm a consultant and I go around and I help teachers. I've always done a lot of presentations and stuff because of my words, and I've been asked to do it and that, but the bulk of my career has been on the ground, right? And now I'm with teachers in their classrooms, working it out with them. So Dave, I hope that helps.
I said it does. Thank you. I was on
Oh, you're
mute.
welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Great.
Sylvia Acosta, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Maryann. Thank you so
Hi.
much for your talk. I appreciate it. I apologize I wasn't able to get on to introduce you because I was so excited, but I'm very happy to be here
Great
right
to
now.
meet you.
Being a teacher for a number of years myself, in Ridgewood, we had the social emotional competency program Open Circle through the Wellesley College, right? And unfortunately it fell to the wayside, but it had all the components that you were talking about. It had the parent component, as well as the teacher training, as well as the classroom, obviously circle times. But you said that you were working with the State Department, right, in the transition. Like,
I'm working with the New Jersey Education Association, the union.
okay. Oh, okay.
I'm a union employee. I work with the union to work in schools, to create like connections between the administrators and teachers and everybody.
Do you have a sense of whether the union is going to get the union itself or teachers can get some support from the new administration perhaps? Is there any feeling that perhaps a focus could be, especially in these stressful times of the pandemic, ways of supporting our students emotionally and making it a priority? Because I'll tell you, the teachers themselves right now are so overwhelmed, but we recognize how our kids' social emotional learning is suffering. And your protocols that you're mentioning here are just such a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Any sense of that being part
I do have it. So because of this award in 2010, I got burst into the national scene with all these connections and meetings and work. So I'm on something now. I'm a leading educator for equity on something called the Education Civil Rights Alliance. What that is a whole bunch of lawyers, right, all over the country through the National Youth Law Center, right, who worked together. They almost formed a kind of a shadow Department of Education during the Trump administration, right, to work legally, to use their super legal powers to fight against aggressions to Title IX and, you know, the Equity for Girls and for Individuals with Disabilities Act. So all these lawyers, it's like this awesome group of lawyers who come and they fight every day, every single day against these attacks on students and civil rights, right? So that said, I'm in a lot of groups. So just like last week, I got an email reporting from the organizations that work on behalf of students, disability organizations and advocates, and they met with the new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. And Miguel met with everybody in a really open forum. And he said, look, I want this conversation to be going. And he said, everyone's been looking at kids through a deficit model. I don't want that. I want it to be an asset model. I was like, oh, tears, almost falling down my cheeks because so I'm hopeful, Sylvia, I'm hopeful. And I think that what I've seen is that even though the federal government doesn't have all the power to do everything, the states listen and then they impose, and then the districts half listen, and then they superimpose. So if we get openness at the federal level, which I suspect we do, I pray we do, we're going to see some change here, because teachers I know are very, very tired. Bye, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's hope. Thank you.
And seeing, let's see, did we address, I think Pam put her,
Pam had a question, but poor Pam didn't get to
she
say
had to
it.
leave, but she did put it into chat.
Did she?
It says the school, or it's a comment maybe. The school can, oh, it became a direct message to me, so you're not going to see it.
Oh, okay. Would you read it then?
I will paste it into so everyone can see it,
Great,
because I'm
great.
sure that was her intention.
Great. I hated that she couldn't speak.
So that, it says from me, but it's really from Pam.
So the school counselor used the bowl and gong to mediate before the program started. They use it every day. Yeah. And then having students lead these circles, right, is a great thing. Sylvia, you also mentioned you had these programs. Here's what I notice in schools too, because I've been around the block 100 times, right? Schools buy a program, or they're like, oh, let's go buy social emotional learning guru. Even if it's me, I don't care. If you buy it and you think that's going to solve it, it's not. What you have to have is learning. And then everybody has to learn and own and use. And this way it doesn't go away, because it goes away. Even the program I'm working for now, Priority Schools, is transforming to a community school model soon. And so what we're doing is going to shift. But what I hope is that I've given the teachers I work with superpowers. Like, they had the powers, right? What I do is help them see their powers and give them a few ideas to help them believe in what they are doing. So you have to embed it in the people. You have to develop the capacity and the belief that they can do it to be able to succeed, you know, for it to endure beyond the program, beyond the paid program.
Okay, I see a hand raised now from either Elaine or Dan. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so Maryann, in 2010, our daughter and the exchange student we were hosting at the time, who was from Malaysia, participated in the Teens Talk About Racism program with you, and they raved about it. So thank you.
But I'm so glad. We've been, you know, it's been going on for over 20 years, the program. And last year we were set to go March 11th. And gosh, we had to cancel it last minute, but we're trying to get it together to do virtually this year. And it's, I think it's a brilliant gem of student leadership that should have been nationwide years ago. But I'm happy that we have this in Bergen County. I just think it's something that we can do all over to bring in these forums. You know, remember when Barack did the beer summit, right? We had this conversation about race. We can be having these conversations. We don't have to wait for a tragedy like we just experienced with the assassination of George Floyd to have conversations. It's been urgent for all of our lives. So yes, thank you. I'm glad they enjoyed it. Was there something else you wanted to share?
Yeah, actually,
went off into my like rhapsodic, sorry.
That's okay. So I actually had a question.
Yeah.
I think everything that you're proposing here and describing is great, but it's also predicated on everyone in the group, whatever the group is, whether it's students or a community or a professional organization, sharing at least some common goal to get to some common place. And sometimes our groups are not voluntary like that, and not everyone will share even whatever the most fundamental goal is. So if the most fundamental goal is equity, there may be people whose whole belief system is against equity. If the whole fundamental goal is acceptance of all the other students, there may be a few bullies in the class for whom that is as much anathema as preaching abortion to a devout Catholic. Not only do they not want to do that, for them, it's a bad thing. And if you have a group that's not voluntary, where not everyone is on board with whatever that most fundamental goal is, and every group sooner or later has a goal, I don't see how one handles that. And sometimes those people can be very destructive to other individuals. You have in circles where the rule is everything's confidential. I've seen situations where a person violated that and caused grief to another member of the group that lasted for years. So it's tricky, and I wonder how you handle this sort of thing.
So, Dan, thank you so much for that question, that important question. As I said earlier, my natural way is to get people talking and doing things among themselves, right? That's my natural way. But what I've learned, I guess, in the second half or even the last third of my career is that these protocols matter, right? For example, I once had a shy student, brilliant, shy 6th grade student who wondered why students did not enjoy learning as much as she did. So I was doing my doctorate at the time. So I gave her the strategy of creating a question focus and running focus groups, this little girl. And she came up with all these questions, and she wanted to create a focus groups of students who were high performing, students who were not so high performing, all over the place. And she went around with her little sheet of questions, and she asked the questions, this little girl who couldn't get out a sentence. And after it was over, she sat with me and she said, you know, I'm very shy. I don't talk with people, but when I have the questions in my hand, I can talk with even the school bully because the questions are right there. So I have learned really through kind of hard knocks because, you know, in the beginning of teaching, I think a lot of us assume everybody's like us, that the protocols you use, that's why I call this educational design, right? You have to, as an educator, part of your skill set is looking at your room and knowing maybe that Elaine is really she doesn't like equity. Sorry, Elaine, figured I could do that, you know, or Dan is gonna be the guy who comes up with the, you know, devil's advocate position, perhaps. So I need to build for that in my programming as I create a structure, a container for all the parts of it. And as a teacher, I'd say that we are awesome at knowing our people, right? And if we're not, we need to get better at that. We need to get better at that. And so I think that when you have a protocol, you can get through those things. And I'm not saying it's all peachy all the time, and that, you know, people aren't going to break covenant and speak poorly about someone else. I'm not saying that. Every risk, communicative risk we take is that in fact, but it's worth it because the alternative is isolation and oppression, right? So I would say that relying more on having a full toolkit of many protocols that work and can be adapted for particular groups is the way to handle that. I would also say that in a classroom setting, what I've seen as I've traveled about is that classrooms can come up with their own sort of community agreements, right? That are co-created with the instructor or the leader of the group that everyone can put on the wall. And those community agreements are the way things are run. And folks, teachers, leaders, facilitators can look at the community agreements and say, what do you guys think is happening now? And someone else can say, well, we're not being respectful in our tone with each other. And finally, I'll say that I've been in that situation before, Dan. I was in the Department of Education at this high-level meeting about teacher policy, the only teacher in America in the room with very fancy people. And I noticed nobody was talking but the one person running the meeting. And I tried to speak and I said, well, how can we get all voices? And the person running the meeting said, all voices we don't want all voices. And I said, what? I didn't say what. I muted myself. And then what I proceeded to keep doing was sending the leader of the meeting little notes, sticky notes, instead of speaking. So you can always find a workaround, but I agree with you, not everyone agrees, but making community agreements, using protocols, and having lots of them helps.
Beth Stein, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, that was a great talk.
Thank you.
I've been, as a substitute teacher, I've been in classrooms from kindergarten through 12th grade. And as a substitute, I don't design any lesson plans, but I do see a lot of what goes on in the classroom. And it always strikes me that a lot of learning is kids having to answer questions. They read texts all the time, and then there are questions a bit for reading comprehensions. There are questions they have to answer, and they're usually like, they're always right there in the text. Yet so many kids, I need help, Mrs. Stein. Can you find the answer? And without even reading the article, I will go over there, and in 5 seconds, I will find the passage where the answer is. And I don't know why the kids can't do that. But I think they can, but they are so afraid of getting the wrong answer, or they don't have confidence, because it's right there. They're only being asked to reiterate what's already there. So I think asking questions instead of answering questions kind of turns that whole approach around, and they get to explore a topic by questioning, and then there's no worry about like getting the right answer, and they're not just spitting back information all the time. So I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much. And yes, that would be having kids just answer fact-based questions from a text is not the best use of their time, right? It's the most limited way to ask questions that exist. Sometimes we need to know, right? Like, when was the Great Depression, right? We need to know certain key things, facts, right? And that's fine. And we need to know, did you understand that the reading was about weather and not about a carnival? You need to know that. But then once we get that squared away, what happened, the basic facts of an article or reading, we need to be engaging students in thinking more deeply. How does what the character experienced relate to your own life? How might you offer advice to the character? How would you change the ending? How can you analyze the character in this story compared to another story? So all of that brings them up, in Bloom's taxonomy, right, up the higher end of analysis and synthesis that we hope the questions have. And what happens when you do stuff like question formulation technique is you get people pulling all kinds of questions together. So thank you.
We have time for one last question, and that will be Diane Kozarski. Please, I see you are already unmuted, so please ask your question.
Maryann, do you have stats that demonstrate that students who are in a community with SEL protocols and, teachers enthusiastic about it, do better in their education? They're more engaged. They can meet the standards for the stupid tests that they do have to take, all that stuff? Or is it just sort of, this is a lovely utopian idea and we wish more people would be happy about it?
So I don't have stats for that, Diane, like that I can just readily, speak to you. But what I would say is that it's easy to create, to track, for example, a variable at the school, regional, and regional level, but particularly in a classroom or in a group, how you can track things like, do the kids participate in any kind of way? Are they writing in the chat? Are they answering a question? Are they asking a question? You can track that as a teacher. You can, instead of having meetings, faculty meetings, where people are just being told a list of things they could read, you can ask people to be action researchers in their own classroom, to practice, to try, measure, and learn. And then they can come back and say, hey, this isn't working because of this, this, and this. So I'm a big one for tracking things at the local level too, and being able to look at how it really depends on the variable that you're tracking. Are you tracking attendance, right? Are you teachers, for example, within the Priority Schools Network where we've worked, they have used more of these wellness initiatives, and they've noticed in their classrooms more attendance, right? Students who didn't attend start attending. Students who didn't do work start attending. But it's not like I can give you like a flow chart or a graph of how that's working. But we need more of that. I would say that that's a point to further research and further tracking, because the question always comes up: how do you know this works? How do you know that any of this great stuff makes a difference? Well, can we track things like, I worked, for example, in a very high flying district in Upper Bergen County, and it was a beautiful school in many ways, but we had a disproportionate number of student suicides over a number of years. It was awful. And, the kids had such high pressure and such perfectionism that we had tremendous loss of life and self-harm and all of that. So schools don't really like to track, things like suicide rate and anxiety, right? They like to cover that stuff up. But what I've noticed is that when students are given these opportunities, there's a greater level of mental health there. But it's hard to track, but it is important to notice. And I think we can track things like, are students turning in their homework more? Are they volunteering more? Is there attendance? What about the numbers of parents who participate in meetings? In what way are they participating? Is the camera are they just clicked in, or are they contributing in any kind of way? Those are the kinds of things that we should be tracking more. Finally, like, for example, you think about things like the National Civil Rights Data Collection. In 2012, the head of that was Ruslan Ali, and she said, let's track data on suspensions. Let's look at who's being suspended and why. And then we can know same crime, different punishment. And what happens is you start to see that kids of color were being suspended and punished in an extraordinarily high number. So I suggest to teachers, hey, why don't you track your discipline data in schools and see what's going on? Who's sitting outside when we have the principal's office? Who's sitting on that bench? Is it your special ed kid who we know has problems with executive function? Always poor kids sitting out there. You're not letting him go to recess, and the poor child needs recess like air. So, we can track these things on a school level. But I say that there are some very clear reasons why people don't want to track things, that I would suggest more tracking of it and tracking of different kinds of things. How can you, for example, one of the things that I've done, for example, in terms of data is like a Google form to students, right? How are you feeling in your classes? What makes you enjoy class more? And sort of at the end of it, how are you doing? And you and why is it better? Why is it worse? And having teachers get that. There's a survey from Harvard University. It's called it's a survey. I think it's a tripart survey. And what it is it helps students communicate how they feel about their learning. Is their instructor, does their instructor care about them? Does the instructor provide challenge? Does the instructor help them? And that has shown to be more effective than standardized tests, right? The results of these surveys about that they're called student perception surveys. So student perception is often seen as like, who cares? It's just kids talking. But those surveys are actually more predictive of success than statistics about test scores in many cases. That's all I can give you.
Well, thanks to everyone who asked questions, and thank you, Maryann. And David, I'm going to hand it back to you to take us forward.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Maryann, for that very interesting and very rich and richly textured talk.